Hello, dear students and friends. In my class series on obstetric emergencies, the next topic is perimortem cesarean section: why, when, and how. We all are well aware about postmortem cesarean section, which is done after death of the mother to deliver the baby. But the concept of perimortem cesarean section, though not new, is not widely practiced. And this is why I want to emphasize this concept so that in a timely manner the mother can be saved. Maternal cardiac arrest is a rare event, incidence of which is 1 in 12,500. So, most obstetricians are unlikely to encounter this challenging situation more than once in their whole career. When this event occurs, the prospect of performing a perimortem cesarean section is daunting, even for the most experienced obstetricians. And failure to institute effective life support, we know, has devastating consequences, ultimately leads to death. In these circumstances, we should remember that our main priority is always the mother. So this is a perimortem cesarean section, which was also known as resuscitative hysterotomy by our non-obstetric clinicians or colleagues. This procedure was initially used to assess maternal resuscitation rather than to save the fetus in situations of trauma or in accident and emergency um, cases. Delivery should ideally be achieved within 5 minutes of cardiac arrest, as this maximizes maternal survival and reduces the risk of long term neurological impairment. Now, the question arises, why should we do a perimortem cesarean section? We know that pregnant women are likely to become more hypoxic compared to their non pregnant counterparts because of higher demand for oxygen. The gravid uterus impairs venous return because of aortic compression and reduces the cardiac output by 60%. So, by emptying the uterus, that is, by delivering the fetus, these compressive forces on the great vessels are reduced, cardiac preload increases, and this reduces oxygen consumption. So, emptying the uterus allows more effective maternal cardiopulmonary resuscitation and potentially more rapid return of spontaneous circulation. When the abdomen is open, this allows for internal chest compressions. A hand can be put in through the open abdomen up to the diaphragm, and we can compress the posterior aspect of heart against the chest wall. Therefore, cardiac compression can be done as a part of resuscitation. This improves the cardiac output tremendously. But if the uterus size is less than 20 weeks, then not much compression on the aorta is there, and therefore, at less than this gestation, it has no proven benefit. If abdominal delivery is expedited in a timely manner, it has been seen that maternal survival is there, although it remains a bit low, 17 to 59%, but fetal survival also may be there at a higher level, 61 to 80%. Now let us look at what evidence tells us. Evidence supporting this practice of perimortem cesarean section is limited. It is limited to case series and case reports, and even there are some research publications. The one which I found most interesting was by Inav et al. They found that perimortem cesarean section was beneficial in 31.7% cases and not harmful in any of the identified ones. So, out of 94 mothers, 51 survived up to hospital discharge, and 78% survived with good to moderately impaired neurological outcome. This review also established that if performed within 10 minutes of cardiac arrest, maternal outcomes were more favorable. Neonatal survivors who had a shorter mean cardiac arrest to delivery time compared to non-survivors in which the time was more than 22 to 13 minutes. Neonatal survival not only occurred, it occurred in those cases in which cardiac arrest was there in the hospital. So that means less time was wasted in delivering the baby. The key to achieving optimum maternal and fetal survival is the rapidity with which the perimortem cesarean section can be performed following the onset of cardiac arrest. Now let us look at the causes of cardiac arrest. There could be many. They are all causes in which there is sudden maternal collapse. It could be hemorrhage 45%, amniotic fluid embolism 13%, heart failure 13%, anesthetic complications 8%, and even trauma in 3%. This picture depicts the various causes of maternal collapse which eventually lead to maternal arrest. First is eclampsia, intracranial hemorrhage and eclampsia. Then if you go from clockwise, anaphylaxis, aortic dissection, cardiac causes like arrhythmias, myocardial infarction, or even cardiomyopathies, hypoglycemia, sepsis, hemorrhage, of course, splenic rupture, hepatic rupture, uterine, antepartum and postpartum hemorrhage, certain medications like magnesium sulfate, local anesthetic drugs, even the use of illicit drugs, pulmonary embolism, and amniotic fluid embolism. So, whenever there is maternal collapse, we should keep these causes in mind. Now, when can it be done? The indications. Existing attempts at resuscitation, if they have been unsuccessful for 4 minutes post maternal cardiac arrest, then it needs to be done. If the gestation is more than 20 weeks, the fundus is palpable above the umbilicus, then it can be done. Short time interval from the onset of maternal cardiac arrest. Ideally, it should be initiated within 4 minutes and completed by 5 minutes post arrest. But it has been seen that the results are good even if it is initiated after 15 minutes. Contraindications when it should not be done. Less than 4 minutes, unless the mother has some known unsurvivable condition, or when you have started resuscitation and your measures have achieved return of spontaneous circulation, or if the gestation is less than 20 weeks and the uterus does not have much effect on aortocaval compression. Unless, of course, there is a multiple pregnancy of 20 weeks when naturally the uterus size would be bigger. In some cases, of prolonged time interval since the arrest. Ideal time interval is 4 minutes, but even if it is more than 15 minutes, outcome is poor, but fetal survival has been reported. It has been reported up to 30 minutes post cardiac arrest. Now, in all such cases of cardiac arrest, we follow the resuscitation algorithm. This is same as for non-pregnant women, apart from certain specific anatomical considerations like one thing which has to be done is manual displacement of the gravid uterus, and the second thing is different placement of defibrillator pads because of breasts which are present anteriorly on the chest. Now this is the algorithm. Whenever we have maternal cardiac arrest, immediately we need to call for help for maternal life support, obstetric delivery team, and neonatal resuscitation team. In these cases, simultaneous displacement of the uterus to the left is very essential. Now, cardiac arrest could be of two types. It could be non-traumatic or it could be traumatic. The things which are done in traumatic arrest are a bit different from non-traumatic. In a traumatic arrest, we can initially think of intubation, chest compression, even thoracotomy, and fluid replacement. While in a non-traumatic one, we follow the standard life support algorithm, ABC of ventilation, ABC of resuscitation, then ventilation, defibrillation, etc. So let us see what are the ABCs of resuscitation. Whenever there is a maternal collapse and we suspect arrest, look, listen, and feel for breath sounds. The airway is to be opened. If there are no breath sounds, standard airway measures have to be taken, like head tilt, chin lift, and jaw thrust to open the airway. Sometimes this does not help, and advanced airway management is essential. It should always be anticipated in such cases. In women who are pregnant, difficulties can be encountered more so in the third trimester. There is a risk of gastric aspiration because of pressure of the gravid uterus on the stomach and relative laxity of the cardiac gastric sphincter, mainly a progesterone effect. In such cases, there could be edema, laryngeal edema, and we always need an experienced anesthetist to establish an early definitive airway, and a cuffed endotracheal tube is always preferred. The physiological changes occurring in pregnancy lead to higher oxygen consumption, we have already seen. But deoxygenation occurs very rapidly in such cases, and so supplemental oxygen should be given at a rate of 10 to 15 liters per minute. It is said that this high flow oxygen may have some detrimental effects on the fetus, but still it is essential for the benefit of the mother, especially in cases of cardiac arrest. The aim is to achieve arterial oxygen saturation of more than 94%. The basic difference in resuscitation of a pregnant woman is that one person from the team should manually displace the uterus to the left. This reduces compression of the inferior vena cava by the gravid uterus. So the up, off, and over technique. Lift the uterus up, push it off the aorta, and over to the left side. The woman essentially needs to be in full supine position for manual compression, cardiac compression, which are easier and effective in this position. Now, sometimes it is difficult to do this technique, and we can laterally tilt the mother at an angle of 15 to 30 degrees, or a whole solid wedge from shoulder to pelvis can be put so that it gives a lateral tilt of 15 degrees, as you can see in this picture. So tilt the patient with left wedge. Now 30 cardiac compressions at a rate of 100 per minute for every 2 ventilation breaths are initially started till defibrillator pads and defibrillator are available. Gradually the woman is intubated, and once intubated, ventilation at a rate of 100 breaths per minute with continuous chest compressions at a rate of 100 per minute without pausing during ventilation. Now, maternal breasts, if large and engorged, they may interfere with placement of defibrillator pads. So these pads can be placed on the anterior and posterior portion, that is posterior pericardium, to optimize defibrillation energy transfer. Early vascular access also should be obtained, ideally with the help of two wide bore cannulae, 16 gauze, that should be given. These cannulae should be inserted above the level of diaphragm so that fluids administered are not affected by aortocaval compression. Sometimes the veins are collapsed and it is difficult to insert these cannulae. Intraosseous access can be considered in these situations, and aggressive fluid resuscitation should be done as soon as possible. So when ventilation, cardiac compressions, intubation, everything has been done, and 4 minutes have elapsed post arrest, and there is no return of spontaneous circulation, we should think of perimortem cesarean section, especially if the gestation is over 20 to 24 weeks. The question arises again, where can it be done? In the hospital, the procedure should be undertaken at the site of cardiac arrest without moving to an operation theatre. So, if the woman is in a labor room or is in a ward, it can be done then and there. Minimal equipment is required, and clinical areas where pregnant women are seen should have a designated equipment box for perimortem cesarean section. Now, the contents are simple and include number 10 scalpel blade pre-mounted on a disposable handle and 3 disposable cord clamps or ligatures for hand tying the cord. So these are the two main things which are required. Other things are already available in the wards, like a solution for skin prep and a gauze to apply that solution, 2 towels for drying and wrapping the baby, sterile intra-abdominal gauze pack or swab in those cases in which return of circulation has occurred and the edges of the uterus start bleeding, so we can pack it. Sterile gloves and disposable apron can be kept in this box, especially in those places where they may not be immediately available. So these are the main constituents or contents of the emergency box. Now prep. What preparation is to be done? A full surgical scrub is not required because we do not have time. Only basic personal protective equipment should be worn, like disposable gloves and apron. Wearing of full gowns or masks can cause delay. Because full sterility is not required, only gloves and apron is sufficient. Abdomen should be cleansed where possible with the help of antibacterial solution like betadine, but this should not delay in starting the procedure. Minimal equipment, therefore, which is required is one scalpel and 2 ligatures or cord clamps. Now, the procedure how to do it. Ensure that the patient is supine and continue CPR. Manual uterine displacement is continued till skin incision is started. Rapidly apply skin prep. Skin incision could be of two types, vertical or horizontal. Vertical midline incision is always recommended because it allows better uterine visualization and it takes less time also. Use your hands to pull the peritoneum open. Assistant should pull the abdominal wall laterally and expose the uterus. Bladder is to be identified. Use of a bladder retractor to retract the bladder so that it does not come in our field. Then comes the uterine incision. Here also, two types of incision. It could be a vertical or a horizontal incision. Again, vertical midline incision on the uterus is preferred, starting at the lower end of the uterus, extending upwards towards the thick, usually 9 plus mm uterine fundus. And caution is that you must always stay in midline. Once a nick has been given with the help of knife, it can be extended with blunt-ended scissors. The index and middle fingers should be used to lift the uterine wall away from the fetus. In some cases, or in those conditions in which the operator is more well versed with a horizontal incision, it can be given with the help of a scalpel, a thin 3 to 5 mm lower segment incision is given, which is usually 15 centimeters in length. Again, it can be extended with fingers or blunt-ended scissors. Caution is to not extend it too much laterally because major blood vessels are there. However, if the uterine size is up to 28 weeks, always use the vertical approach. If the placenta is seen in the incision site, then cut through it, cut the amniotic membranes or release amniotic fluid. Leaving it intact may actually assist delivery, but eventually they get ruptured and amniotic fluid comes out. Locate the presenting part, which could be head, buttocks or feet. Use cupped hand to elevate the presenting part through the uterine incision, aided by trans-abdominal pressure applied by the other hand or by an assistant to deliver the baby. Clamp the cord twice, cut immediately between the clamps, hand over the baby to neonatal resuscitation team, deliver the placenta, and clear the inside of the uterus of remaining debris. Massage the uterine fundus to stimulate uterine contraction and lessen further blood loss. If there are bleeding vessels, clamp the actively bleeding vessels or uterine vessels, ensure bladder is empty, and to initiate uterine contractions, give 5 units IV syntocin. Now, in cases of non-traumatic maternal cardiac arrest, internal cardiac massage can also be performed. Once the baby is delivered, the placenta can be delivered or it can be left in situ, and at all times, maternal resuscitation should be continued. Further management is dictated by effectiveness of continuing resuscitation. If resuscitation is successful, increasing uterine tone will cause placental separation and placenta can be delivered. Again, if circulation starts, there would be bleeding, so ensure uterine tone is appropriate and maintained. Now, management when resuscitation is successful. So, with the return of spontaneous circulation, we would encounter atonic uterus and bleeding from the uterine incision. Uterotonics have to be immediately given, and we can pack the incision site. Now, general anesthesia should be administered, and the woman should be transferred as soon as possible to an operation theatre for formal exploration and closure. Appropriate broad-spectrum intravenous antibiotics need to be given. The uterus and abdomen should now be anatomically closed to achieve adequate hemostasis. The upper segment incision, that is the vertical incision, should be closed in 3 layers to secure hemostasis with the help of number 1 braided polygalactin or similar suture. First layer is closed using interrupted figure of 8 or Z stitches because they are more hemostatic. Then the other layers can be closed with simple interrupted sutures, and the last layer, that is the third layer, should be closed by base wall sutures, that is inverting sutures. Adequate time should be allowed for uterine closure to ensure uterine perfusion and blood pressure have normalized to ascertain hemostasis. If bleeding continues, abdominal or pelvic packing can be done, and a large bore non-suction tube drain should be left in place. If you have left a pack in situ, the abdomen can be partially closed only with a few skin sutures. Subsequently, once the woman's condition stabilizes, return to theatre within 24 hours and removal of the pack can be undertaken with definitive closure. After surgery, care of this woman should always be in an intensive critical care unit. Now, management when resuscitation is unsuccessful. After the uterus is emptied, resuscitative efforts should continue until the clinical situation dictates a decision to stop. Now, who takes this decision? The decision to stop is taken by a team which includes an attending senior consultant, team which includes obstetricians, anesthetists, accident and emergency staff, together with a cardiac arrest team, and it should be clearly stated that all team members agree to this decision. All IV access ports, lines, and intubation equipment at the time of declaration of death should be secured and they should be left in situ. It should not be removed. The placenta should not be removed, and if the uterus was open, it should be left unsutured. Preferably an open abdomen. It might be appropriate to close skin edges if a large incision with minimal number of sutures before covering the wound with a dressing. So the wound is covered with a dressing, but the skin is closed. All these details of what you've done should be entered in the records. Appropriate neonatal care and family support is vital, whatever be the outcome. So, this is the aftercare. Keeping contemporaneous medical records can be difficult, but all staff should ensure that comprehensive notes are added to the medical or nursing records as soon as possible after the event. So everything should be well documented. Entries should be signed, timed, and dated appropriately. Accurate documentation, a complete critical incident report, and in event of maternal death, the coroner should be informed. Debrief and emotional support form an essential part of management in such situations. The distress which is caused by maternal cardiac arrest may be underestimated. For the family, unsuccessful resuscitation means loss of a wife, daughter, or mother, and possibly loss of a much wanted baby too. Even if resuscitation is successful for both the family and staff members involved have undergone much of emotional turmoil, trauma, and stress of a dramatic event, and therefore they should be provided with adequate emotional support. Both relatives and staff members should be offered a thorough debrief with a detailed exploration and discussion of the events. So, to conclude, obstetricians will rarely need to perform a perinatal cesarean section. It is the colleagues in accident in emergency who may need to perform it, and also those in a critical trauma center with a critical trauma scenario. The take home message is focus on the need for rapid action to maximize the chance of maternal survival. The critical step is to make the decision to proceed, and that too at the right time. Fetal survival depends on many factors, including gestation, but it is always a secondary issue and should not be the prime driver for the decision. Rapid and effective action can be improved through multidisciplinary team training. So, a whole team who could be involved in such a procedure should be trained. As with all critical obstetric emergencies, a detailed documentation is always vital. These are the references. If you have any doubts, you can go through them. Thank you. My class series on obstetric emergencies would be continued. If you have any queries, you can ask me anytime, and please do subscribe to my YouTube channel.